Hi, I'm Arun George, and you're listening to Three Things, the Indian Express news show. In today's episode, we'll be looking at the government's plan to consider amending the minimum age of marriage for women. We'll also be looking at the shocking case of a teenage son of an RTI activist in Bihar being arrested and spending months in a jail that is meant for adults only. But first, we're analyzing one of the Prime Minister's big plans for Jammu and Kashmir.
ये एक साल जम्मू कश्मीर के एक नई विकास यात्रा का बड़ा महत्वपूर्ण पड़ाव है.
In his speech on Independence Day, Prime Minister Narendra Modi spoke about how much progress had been made in the erstwhile state of Jammu and Kashmir since it lost its special status and became a union territory. He spoke of the progress made by communities, how schemes like Ayushman Bharat and the Back to Village scheme were being implemented. He also spoke about how delimitation would be finalized and elections would be held in the union territory in the future. But the Indian Express's Liz Matthew reported a more specific plan that the central government has for the union territory, a plan that is being personally supervised by the Prime Minister. Liz reported about how the Prime Minister could announce major projects, including a high-tech and environment-friendly Naya or new Srinagar and Jammu. She reported about how the Union Ministry of Urban Development and Jammu and Kashmir administration were jointly working on the final blueprint for certain projects. We're now speaking with Liz about her report and why a big-ticket project is important for the BJP in the Union Territory. Okay, so Liz, you've reported about how the Prime Minister is personally supervising a new plan for Jammu and Kashmir. Could you explain what this plan is?
You know that we just had first year of abrogation of 370 and there are two union territories now. And the main plank of the government and the BJP for their campaign on 370 abrogation was that there will be a major development plan for Jammu and Kashmir. So this project, which my sources have told me, that Prime Minister himself is keen to see that there is some, major projects happening in Jammu and Kashmir. So one thing is this Naya city, the new Srinagar city. So we know that not much development has been happening in the city, and because of the tourism inflow and other issues, there were environmental issues. And one key part of it is the Dal Lake restoration. The officers are saying, the population around the Dal Lake has really increased and there is like a heavy density of population. And also the lake itself has shrunk. So there were some studies in the recent past also, like how much the lake has shrunk and, the area around that lake has shrunk. The threat of pollution and this large scale tourism also has made it like very fragile. So the new city, one part of that project which they are planning, which, both the Jammu and Kashmir government and Urban Development Ministry are working out the final details of it. It is the restoration of the lake. And my sources have told me that, they'll be moving or shifting some population, kind of ease out that density from the areas around Dal Lake, and the all Dal Lake will be back. This is what their one thing, which Prime Minister is very keen on. Other part of the project is the city. City has its own architecture, the different culture is there. So Prime Minister, according to the officials, wanted to keep all those things, and at the same time should be a very environment friendly and a high-tech city should be there. Because, only the PM, according to these people, feel that, only that kind of a project can generate jobs, can attract more investment to the state. The same with the Jammu, there is also a plan for a new city for Jammu. So he himself is talking to officials and he himself is seeing the details of the plan. This is what I've been told.
So one question would be then, why is the Prime Minister involved? Or rather, why would he want to project himself as being involved in what would seem like a very state-based project?
See, one is that the abrogation of 370, as you know, that has been an ideological agenda of the BJP. And BJP in its second term, the moment they came in, immediately after that, they pushed this and it got revoked. And there is this promise of we will bring development. We know that already the existing mainstream political parties in the state, because of the restrictions and results of the house arrest, they already diminished. And BJP's whole agenda is to come up as the main party there And there is a bit of politics also involved. This is what at least the observers are saying. We know that, Article 370 abrogation was projected as a major achievement of the Narendra Modi government and the BJP in the last 1 year. But the credit was going to Home Minister Amit Shah. Obviously, I think, and also this is what politically, those people who are closely watching developments in BJP pointing out that, obviously Prime Minister do not want that the entire Jammu and Kashmir credit to go to one person or something. It has to be either his governments and parties. And also, obviously it is the Prime Minister, the head of the government. So he wants to take charge of the situation and also to see that the development projects are in the state where they have promised. And it was the main excuse they have or justification they have given to the major constitutional changes there in the state.
How much does this kind of a flagship scheme mean to the BJP in the Union Territory and why?
See, obviously, more or less, even the interviews with the former Chief Minister Omar Abdullah and other leaders have recently indicated that, more or less people have reconciled to the fact that, Article 370 abrogation is like the special status of Jammu and Kashmir is gone. Now, what you have to do is focus on how you can come up on, how you yourself can be relevant as a political party and as a stakeholder in the political and other affairs of the administrative affairs of the state. So in this case, BJP, because when the Panchayat election were held, BJP have got the highest number of sarpanchs with them. So their main thing was to start from the ground, In the 1 year, what they have done was that all the laws enacted by government have been extended to cover Union Territory of J&K, and also some laws they have amended to reflect these modern times. Because the one reason they were saying that, Kashmir is not socially and economically not progressing because of this special status. So now that, this Right to Free and Compulsory Education Act, Juvenile Justice, Care and Protection Children Act 2015, the Protection of Human Rights Act 1994, and Right to Information Act, all these are now applied in this thing. So legally they have done that. Now they have to show that, what they are going to do. And we have seen that almost, I think, $200 million or something funds. So the fund devolution happened and the panchayats were given in charge for the development from the ground level. So BJP's political wing has been working on how to get control of or how to get the dominance in the political and electoral scene whenever the election comes.
So, though the Prime Minister mentioned it in his Independence Day speech, we're still a long way off from delimitation and elections in the Union Territory. But really, what does the BJP hope to achieve in the state in the long term?
In the long term, it is very clear as a political party. BJP, we know that, we have been seeing that from 2014, what BJP has been doing. They were expanding the footprints politically, and the political activities have extended to all the states where they never had reached. And in the areas where they are directly not been able to control or have the dominance, they have been getting people from other parties to migrate to BJP, or they have been getting alliances with the smaller parties, like what they did in Bihar. So BJP, as a political party, they want to expand, one. And Kashmir, ideologically, it is the most important place for them. And it is Muslim dominated in terms of population. And also it's a border with Pakistan. So obviously they don't hide anything, their interest in becoming a major player at the electoral scene as well as the political scene in the state. And like you said, the delimitation process is a long process. Delimitation obviously will be controversial because the opposition fear, the critics fear that, the delimitation will be done in such a way that, BJP will get dominance in many areas where so far the Muslim population dominated, and also the parties from the state, the regional parties have kind of called the shot. So over the time, we will be seeing once the delimitation process starts, there will definitely be criticism attack and there will be another political war over it. But at the end of the day, even if it is a long game, BJP wants to dominate the state politics.
Before we get to the next segment, I just wanted your quick attention. One of the big reasons people say that they like this show is because it helps them understand the news better. It provides them with the context they need to see the bigger picture. And there's perhaps no other place that does this better than the Indian Express's Explained section. We on 3 Things refer to the section regularly, and it helps us make this show. If you're a regular reader of the newspaper, you know how useful the Explained section can be. especially when you're looking for in-depth analysis by the right experts. You can log into indianexpress.com/explained and access their coverage 24/7. Explained by the Indian Express, where news that matters is explained by experts who know the subject. Now, back to the show. In his Independence Day speech, the Prime Minister also spoke about how a committee was examining the possibility of changing the minimum age of marriage for girls in India. He said that the central government would take a decision after a committee appointed to look into the issue submits its report. The committee that the Prime Minister referred to was a task force that had been set up by the Ministry for Women and Child Development on the 2nd of June. The committee was to examine the possibility of increasing the age of marriage for women from 18 to 21. One of the reasons to do so is the desire to improve health indicators like maternal mortality ratio, that is the number of women who die while giving birth, and improving nutritional levels. But what are the laws that govern the age of marriage in India? Why is it different for men and women? And how effective are such laws believed to be in changing societal norms? Apurva Vishwanath, who reports on law for the Indian Express, now joins us to explain this and more. Okay, so Apurva, could you start by explaining what laws currently govern marriageable age in India?
So marriages are governed by personal laws of different communities. So for Hindus, you have the Hindu Marriage Act. And for the Muslims, you have the Shariat Act that operates. And there's also the Special Marriage Act. The Hindu Marriage Act, for example, puts 18 and 21 as the minimum age of marriage for women and men. In Sharia, it's considered that a woman who is above the age of puberty, who has hit puberty, is allowed to be married. And that is understood to be 12 years. So 12 years and above, you can marry. So Special Marriage Act again puts the 18 and 21, which is in the Hindu code, as the minimum age to marry. So these are coming from religious texts, and those religious doctrines have been followed for centuries. But in the case of Hindu law, it's evolved over time, from a time when child marriages were acceptable to having a minimum age of marriage below which your marriage won't be recognized. It's come a long way.
What I'm trying to understand here is also, as per Indian laws, a minor, that is someone who's under 18, can be married, but it's not illegal in any way, right? And also, it's just the marriage that is invalid, and there is no sort of criminal action taken against those who are involved?
No, child marriages are illegal in India. There is a Child Marriage Restraint Act that does say that a child marriage is illegal. So this is for the parents who sort of arrange this marriage, or the middleman usually who talks to both the families, bringing in a child bride and situations like that. However, the marriage itself will not be considered illegal just because it's a case of child marriage. So for that to happen, the minor girl or even the minor boy has the right to say that they do not want this marriage, and then it will be declared null and void. So then it will be considered as if the marriage never happened. But the status of the marriage itself, suppose a bride was married at the age of 17, she cannot be denied her rights in her husband's family only because the marriage happened when she was still a minor. So that's what you mean by child marriage is illegal, but the validity of the marriage can survive if the girl and the boy wanted to.
So basically, if you're married as minors, if both parties in that sense are agreeable to it, it can continue on as a marriage. But if one of them, or if the woman or the girl feels that she wants to nullify the marriage, it can then be nullified.
Yes, she has a right to nullify the marriage.
And so the only reason for this being there is to maintain the rights of the woman over property. Could you explain that?
This is basically done because you want to give the minor girl a certain degree of protection in getting her rights in the marital home. For example, she should still have a claim over the property, or her kids should have recognized paternity. To protect these aspects, the marriage is not immediately considered null and void. It is only done at the request of the minor involved in the marriage. So that could be either the husband or the wife. So suppose either of them do not object to it. They want to continue with the marriage. The marriage is not completely recognized till they turn 18. And once they turn 18, it will be a valid marriage.
So, most of us grow up knowing that marriage is out of bounds for minors, that is those under 18. But why isn't that sort of age standardized, and why is it different for men and women?
For men and women, the age being different, there is no rational reasoning why it is. Most of our personal laws have a patriarchal legacy, which has continued to be an upper age for men and a lower age for women. If you look at international conventions that India's signed, be it CEDAW, which asks all countries to eliminate all forms of discrimination amongst genders, it says that the age of marriage should be the same for both men and women. But like most personal laws, it is patriarchal and subject to a lot of discrimination against women. The age has been different. But if you look at why it's different for different faiths, it's also because their personal laws have been in such a way. No personal law has a standardized law. In every aspect, from succession to adoption, marriage, procedure for marriage, all personal laws are deeply diverse and they have different reasons for that.
Okay, so then what's the logic behind looking to amend the law now, given it already exists in a sense?
There are two main arguments that have been brought up to sort of take a relook at this minimum age of marriage. One is obviously bringing in gender parity and having the same age of marriage for men and women. And two comes from a health perspective. Early pregnancies have been linked to reduced female health, dip in nutrition for the lactating mother, and then you also have increased child mortality linked with early pregnancies. So, from that perspective, increasing the age of marriage is one of the many things that the policymakers are trying to push for better female health.
So, if the law does change once this recommendation comes and there is a discussion and the laws change, does it then become a universal one that cuts across faiths?
Ideally, the central legislation will be the same for all the states. However, with any personal law, states can bring in their own individual amendments because we do recognize that customs vary from region to region. But something as fundamental in a legislation like the minimum age of marriage would more or less be the same for all states. But you may have slight changes, say for some regions where there is a particular cultural or a very dominant cultural narrative that is followed.
So, on the face of it, this is a beneficial law because it benefits women who get into these marriages much younger than they should be in some senses, and there's maternity health. But, given the existence against of these laws for such a long time, how effective are such laws believed to be on the ground?
Well, the minimum age of marriage has been 18 since independence, but that hasn't really ensured that child marriages have disappeared completely. Like we say, law follows social change, and sometimes social change follows changes in law. So, one of the reasons that you bring in a specific law is also because there is more awareness about it. And over time, there is a change in societal action. So, it may not immediately mean that everybody will only start getting married, say, at the age of 18 or 21, whatever the new law prescribes. But it does give women who want to exercise that right a right. That itself is one of the challenges.
A 14-year-old resident of Buxar district in Bihar had written his school exams and was waiting for a ride back home. When he saw two residents of his village approaching on a motorcycle, he asked them for a lift and hopped on. That was in February. Just minutes after he got on that motorcycle, the boy and two others were stopped by the police and arrested. The boy was booked for allegedly carrying a gun, and despite being a minor, the police claimed that he was an adult after his arrest. He was then remanded to the Buxar jail and was scheduled to return home on Monday, after 5 months in jail. The Indian Express's Santosh Singh in Bihar reported on the case and how the boy had been sent to a jail despite clearly being a minor. We're now speaking with Santosh about how he discovered this case and why a 14-year-old ended up spending 5 months in a jail that the law says he should have never gone to. So, Santosh, could you start by telling us how you came across this case?
Since, so many cases of harassment of RTI activists come up very often. There is a leading RTI activist in Bihar. He heads the organization called Bihar Nagrik Manch, Shiv Prakash Rai. We could have filed some 1,000 RTI. We were talking one day, he said there have been so many cases of atrocities and RTI activists. And then he just discussed this case as well. Among 5, 6, 7 cases, he discussed that. Then I just tried to get all the details and papers, and I asked him if they had anything to prove that he's a minor. He said, of course. Then we got across to the boy's father. as per rules, he's a father of minor. We can't name him. So we got the details, and the school headmaster also testified that the boy is born in April 2006. He's only 14. And then we also talked to the police officer who was the complainant in the case. He said he had no idea. He did what he was asked to do. Then I asked him, who asked him to do so? Then he SHO. Then we tried to get to SHO. SHO did not respond. Then, of course, we spoke to SP. SP said, okay, yes, yeah, this matter has been brought. So we didn't have any concrete answer to that. And I asked DGP. Then DGP set up an inquiry and he asked SP to look into it. So by that time, charge sheet had been filed. Not much could have been done. And it was finally the Juvenile Justice Board, after we did the story, that swung into action. Then they heard the matter in a single day. And on 14th of August, they heard the matter and said, no, nothing doing. He's a minor and he must be out of adult state.
Santosh says that the boy's father is a right to information or RTI activist and had been filing applications for the last 5 to 6 years, all of them concerning various government schemes in the area. They were mostly matters related to the man's village, like Narega projects and the state government scheme to develop roads. The boy's father also probed the Primary Agriculture Credit Society, which procures rice and wheat at the minimum support price offered by the government. And he had uncovered a fair amount of things.
And in Manrega, it was very interesting. He got out some interesting detail on how some school children were enrolled as Manrega workers. They had the job cards and even payments were made against it. So once he took up that Manrega, so all the crooked elements got alert. By the time he filed second RTI on this tax thing, and he sought details of not just 1 year but 10 years since 2009 till 2019 about the procurement. Though he has not got the RTI reply as yet, but still he alleged that it was the handiwork of some tax mafia in collision with local police, and his son was targeted. Earlier, they did file a SC/ST case against the RTI activist, but he got clean chit.
Santosh says that the boy had just written his 5th exam on the 29th of February when he hitched a ride back home with the 2 people from his village. There were 3 people on a motorcycle, which is a violation of the law, but it's hardly uncommon. So that's why when they were stopped by the police, the boy believed it was because of violations like not wearing a helmet or 3 people riding on a motorcycle.
But later, by the evening, the boy's father got to know he had been arrested in arms. And it was strange. Police saw that he was carrying this country-made pistol boy and one live cartridge with another pillion rider and the next cartridge with another guy. So it looked very strange. The police story is not at all convincing. And second thing, how could you declare a minor boy just 14 years of age as 18? He should have consulted the boy's father. That is the basic thing to do. Boy's father didn't get a call at all. And just he was produced and his age was shown as 18 and he was sent to Buxar jail and he had to spend his days with adults in Buxar jail.
In India, the Juvenile Justice Act states that every minor who may have violated the law must even be detained separately from adult criminals. The idea is to keep minors separately so that we can protect them from sexual and physical violence and trauma. As recently as February 2020, the Supreme Court reaffirmed that the police has no right to detain children in a lockup or a jail. The court said that a minor has to be kept in the care of a special juvenile police unit or a designated child welfare officer until being produced before a juvenile justice board. And the court clearly said that there was no question of detaining a minor in a lockup or a jail. In this case, the boy has spent 5 months in prison with adults who are either under trials or convicts. So could you explain why they wouldn't verify his age given he's claiming he's 14, he's coming back from a school, his father is saying he's 14? What would the normal procedure be in such a case then?
Normal procedure, he had to consult the father and ask for his school certificate. He has passed the matriculation. Police has to produce the matriculation certificate and judge has to be convinced. If he's a minor, then Juvenile Justice Board would take up the matter then and there. But in this case, the RTI activist is saying he is alleging that the local tax mafia did so in collision with the local police. Something we cannot verify on record that what was the matter. But it is a fact that the police, neither the complainant nor the SHO nor the DSP for that matter, consult father ever. And for last 6 months, he had been running from pillar to post for bail of his son just to prove that his son is a minor. Nothing happened. He had also spoken to DGP, in fact, met DGP. DGP had asked SP to look into the matter, but nothing happened in the matter till we did the story. We carried the story, spoke to DGP, then he took the matter appraised. But by that time, a charge sheet had been filed.
Santosh says that now that the boy has been proven to be a minor, he will not face trial in the case anymore. The case will now be looked at afresh, and it's a big relief for the family.
What happened to the other two people who were arrested with him? Are they still in Buckshot jail?
No, they got bail. They were adults and their parents, they got the bail. I think they got regular bail 2 months before.
The two others arrested with the boy also had no past criminal record, but now face trial. However, Santosh says that because they were only accused of carrying live cartridges, the case against them is much weaker.
So, why was there a delay in processing this boy's bail application given that the others had already gotten bail just after 2 months?
It was because of the closure of the court, because of the lockdown. And since the two boys, those were adults, got bail, and there was one option to get him bail, but the family had to declare him an adult, something they could not have done.
Santosh says that the police has started a probe to look into the flawed handling of the case, but there's no assurance of action being taken just yet. He says it was some quick action by the Juvenile Justice Board after the report emerged that resulted in the boy being released after documents proving his age.
Has his family said anything post his release about what they intend to do next? Has his father spoken about this at all?
Yeah, his father has said, okay, it's very happy, it's a long battle, but he's saying he is a poor person, he cannot move his son. He is concerned about the study of his father. He wants his son to resume his study. He says he has already lost his 1 year. At best, he can write his compartmental exams, but he is not too keen to write his compartmental exams since he has already scored 83%. It looks to be a bright boy. So he will write his normal exam, but that would mean he would lose 1 academic year. See, he wants to shift his son to some another place, but for he's poor guy, he's just a petty farmer, not even a petty farmer, even less than that. He anyhow manages for his family. His elder son works in Ranchi, he supports his family. So that is the main concern, and how to fend off those elements. He wants some action against those elements, direct or indirectly. He wants proper investigation into the matter. Since we persistently followed the case with the DGP and SP, and we are still following, I hope some kind of action is being taken against who all are responsible.
You were listening to The Three Things by The Indian Express. Today's show was written and produced by me, Arun George, and as always, was edited and mixed by our producer, Joshua Thomas. Before we go, here's another reminder to check out Indian Express's Explained page. You can log on to indianexpress.com/explained and find in-depth analysis by the right experts. It has everything you need to know to understand the news better and see the bigger picture. If you like the show, then do subscribe to us wherever you get your podcasts. You can also recommend the show to someone you think will like it. Share it with a friend or someone in your family. It's the best way for people to get to know about us. You can also tweet us at Express Audio and write to us at podcast@indianexpress.com.